I was just thinking about how hard it was when I first started my practice and just chatting with different people about what to do, how to do it, which EHRs to use, how to do billing, just every step. I just remember it being really hard for me, and I'm not sure if you feel that way, but we've put together a whole community to help you really get to the next level of your practice. So whether you're in solo, starting a group, or already have a group, to me, just being around other people, getting access to ongoing information, that's really the way that you get to that next level. I wish I had what we have over at practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. Over there, you're going to see just an outline of exactly how we can help you with having a sustainable solo practice, launching a group practice, or having a sustainable group practice. And you can explore all the tracks over there. You can watch some videos, see what some people have said, how they've really just grown at a different level. But for the cost of one counseling session, you can get major support for getting to that next level. And we do a 90-day money-back guarantee. If your practice is not thriving in 90 days, we'll give you all your money back. So again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1401. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We enjoy talking to people that are in all different sectors of the mental health space, people that are in technology, that are doing research, that are doing practical, just practice development. We love going to all the different corners and doing deep dives. Also, if you haven't been following, I've been building Great Lakes online counseling over the weeks behind us, and every week I'm telling you where I'm spending my 2 hours a week growing that practice. So if you've missed that, make sure you go back and check that out. Also, Melissa, one of our consultants, has been doing a podcast takeover. So make sure you go check out those episodes as well. It's just adding a different flavor, different voice, different perspective than maybe just me leading every single show. So I am so excited to have Dr. Tara Thiagarajan, who is a neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and founder of Sapien Labs, a nonprofit organization dedicated to understanding and improving global mental health. She is the creator of the Mental State of the World Report, one of the largest ongoing data sets tracking mental well-being across populations. With a background spanning neuroscience, engineering, and data science, she focuses on how modern environments, technology, and social change are reshaping the human mind at scale. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I love having researchers and scientists on the show because sometimes we feel that something's happening and it's just our feeling. And when we have that data behind it, we can say, oh, that's accurate, that's inaccurate, it's based on old assumptions. Even in my family lately, we've been saying, I need a operating system update. And so it's like when we get new information, that's kind of how we're talking about it, that it's not a big deal to change our mindset. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Well, let's start with the Mental State of the World report. One of the largest ongoing data sets tracking mental well-being. That's just amazing. When I saw that you were going to be on the show, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to know the trends. I want to know what's shifting and kind of where what I feel is happening is accurate and other areas where maybe it's not so accurate. So let's start there. What is the Mental State of the World report? And then what are you seeing that's shifted since you maybe first started doing this?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that, to talk about what we're showing in this report really requires explaining what we're measuring. And we use a measure called the MHQ that we developed. And essentially what this does is it looks at 47 different aspects of mental function and problems. And so it's 27 mental capacities or functions and 20 different problems that people rate on a, life impact scale. So how much is having a problem with this impacting my ability to function? And then on the capacities, it's either it has an ability, how much is it an asset to my life on one hand versus a problem for me? And so it could be something like emotional control, could be something you're very good at, and it's really, an asset for you. And on the other hand, you could also have a problem with it. And then similarly, there's questions like problems like, suicidal thoughts. There's no upside to that. Um, and this assessment really derived out of psychiatry and psychology and neuroscience. It's basically taking everything that people are asking about the mind across disorders and capabilities, and synthesizing it into, what is it that would really give us a 360 view of the human mind and what's going on with it. Right. So what we do, so this assessment really positions individuals on this an aggregate metric, the MHQ itself, that goes from clinically distressed to thriving. And so it's a continuum, and we're trying to see where do people and populations sit on this, on this continuum, and what are there changes that are happening? Are there differences between different groups, and what's driving that? So that's the basis of it. So we started down this path in 2019, and at that time, the first time we saw that there was actually a difference between older people and younger people. And what we found is that every younger age group was doing worse than the previous age group. Now, one thing that you might think is that, okay, young people tend to exaggerate their problems, and that's why they look worse. But in fact, when we relate it to things like either the number of days you went to work or other kinds of productivity metrics, what you see is that older and younger people are pretty rating things pretty much the same. So when we say the MHQ is lower, it really means that people are struggling, in a functional way more than the others. So that's the background to this. So we first saw that there was younger generations were doing worse. And then over the COVID years, you saw one of the biggest trends we saw is that the younger generations really had this like sharp decline, but older generations, like above 45, pretty much stayed stable through COVID. They didn't see a big drop, or a very small drop that came back up after a couple of years, but the younger generations really fell. And I'm saying like under 34, those age groups dropped sharply. And then since then, there's been a very, very, there's been hardly any recovery, essentially. And so, what that's done is it created an even bigger difference between older and younger people. So that's one of the big trends, is that every younger generation is doing worse, and that gap got worse over COVID and has remained so.
I want to ask real quick. So where is kind of that point where, like, you I think you said 45 maybe, like where's the point where people recovered post COVID and those that did not tend to recover age
Yeah,
wise?
I think the under 35 did not tend to recover post
Okay.
COVID.
And
And
do you
the
guys
decline was
also
sharp.
do you
Yeah.
guys also research children? Like I have 11 and 14-year-olds. Are they part of the study, or
Well,
is there a
we
lower
have
side
looked
to it?
we have looked at age 13 and above, but not before COVID. We started looking at them after COVID, so we can't say how they declined through COVID, but what we can see is that decline from older to younger generations has continued with young people. So, the 13 to 17 are doing worse than the 18 to 24, for example.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that already with all the economic factors beyond COVID, economic factors alone is one thing. Plus, just all the different things it takes to just be an adult now compared to people that are in their late 40s, 50s, 60s. It just is compounding. What shifts have really happened since you started here, where you're seeing, other than those age gaps, shifts that are starting to peek their head out for either all generations or even specific generations?
Yeah. So the profile of problems is changing with younger generations. So this MHQ is sort of an aggregate metric that takes all the capacity functions and problems together into, to kind of give you an overview. But what you see is that the type of things that young people are facing are now very different. Um, some of the very fast growing symptoms that were hardly prevalent at all in the older generations are things like a sense of feeling detached from reality, hallucinations. There's a lot more growing aggression. Um, some of the emotional control, relationships, that what we call this as a dimension, the social self, which is the ability to form positive relationships, to maintain positive relationships, to cooperate with other people. Um, all of those aspects, relational aspects, are declining quite dramatically. Um, and so definitely a very different profile in younger people than you see in, the type of problems of older adults.
Mm. Now, when we think about just shifts that are happening worldwide, are you seeing things that happen in certain areas of the world differently than other areas?
Absolutely. So the overall trend is the same across the entire modern world, right? Every single country. But if you look at, for example, and this is really surprising because we've spent a lot of time now trying to understand why this is the case. But if you look at, um, where are the young people doing better? It's in sub-Saharan Africa, and these are some of the poorest countries in the world. And so the big question is why? Why would that be the case when, the United States, for instance, spent something like $284 billion last year on mental health. And countries like Tanzania and Kenya spend hardly anything, but the young people there are doing better. And so the big question is why. And that's been something we've been trying to understand is what are the factors driving this, and what are all of the trends around that. So I can get into those
Yeah,
and
please do.
yeah,
Yeah,
talk
what are
about
some
what
of those
they are.
factors?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, we typically think that it's all about money, and the more money you have, probably the better off you should be. And there is an effect of obviously everything else being constant. Um, if you have more money, you probably have better mental health. But and similarly, everything else being constant, if you have more education, you also have mental health. But the challenge is that what you see is that in a macro sense, as people have had more money, what they've traded off have been things that are actually very important for developing mental health. So. Um, one of the interesting, I would say very interesting things is that those who actually have greater love and care for well-being of others, which is a very outward thing, um, have much better mental health. And similarly, those who have much closer family bonds have much better mental health. And so these are some of the things societally that what you see is that although income has gone up, that for a like 5% increase in income, we've diminished in family closeness and love for others by something like 25% in the younger generations. In 2 generations, that's fallen apart. And so what you realize is that these social bonds are very important because the nurturing of those is also what helps build your social capacity, the ability to form relationships, maintain them, handle conflict, handle disagreement, find harmony in groups, things like that. That those are things that people have stopped doing.
Hmm.
And so that's been one side of it. The other part of it is also the rise with modern life of products that are directly disruptive of the nervous system. So, for instance, the younger you got a smartphone as a child, the more likely you are to have mental health problems as an adult. And some of the things that relate directly to smartphones are the things like detachment from reality and hallucinations are very, very closely tied to having a smartphone very early on, because then instead of integrating into a real social fabric in real life, um, you are essentially raised by algorithms in a virtual world.
And what are
And that,
those ages that, is too young? Is it also like how they're using the smartphone, like if they're on social media versus just like
well,
watching?
certainly how they're using a smartphone. I think this is an aggregate at the population level. Like, for example, if you have pornography available to all 9-year-olds, you could say, oh, those who don't go there. But, if your friend's brother who's 14 says, go and take a look, you're probably going to do it, and
Hmm.
you can't unsee what you've seen at
Yeah.
that age. So I think it's there's not the guardrails to prevent someone from going into all these corners of the world that you ordinarily wouldn't want your child to go and be witness to or be part of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say what we see is a very, very steep drop in mental health in adulthood for every younger age below 13 that you got a phone. So, below 13 seems to be exceptionally dangerous for kids. And above 13, I mean, it's still not good, but it's not as steep a fall off as it is, before 13, and and that is one of the factors that explains why African countries kids have young adults are doing much better, because most of them didn't get phones until they were 18 years
Mm.
old, compared to age 11 in, say, the United States, or in some European countries it's as young as 9. So there's a few things in that are, one is that it displaces a lot of the things you should be doing. So, kids are outdoors less, they're in nature less. All of these things are protective. They're also less socially engaged, and you need to, in order to develop all these social capacities that where people have big problems with social interaction, it's something that needs practice. It's sort of like language, that the brain has the capacity to learn language. So also we have a huge part of the brain dedicated to social cognition, like understanding and recognizing facial expression, tone of voice, touch, maybe even olfactory, or smell, and various cues that you get about another person, about their intent, and all of those sorts of things. And then also how to manage group dynamics, right? So how do you learn how to deal with disagreement and conflict, and have your voice heard and stuff like that. It all requires being out there, doing things, things like where kids used to do that naturally. You were playing at recess, and people thought maybe, oh, you're wasting time, you should be inside on your iPad, doing math problems. But in fact, you're trading off learning social, uh, developing your social cognition for that. And so,
Mm.
time is finite. And so I think that's been a big part of it. It also, the disruption to sleep. And so, especially when it's early in development, it has a big impact. So I'd say that's a major aspect. Another major aspect is ultra processed food. And this was surprising to us because there's not been a lot of research on it. But, today there's over 4,000 chemicals in the food system, as preservatives, emulsifiers, colors, additives, all sorts of things. And many of them are actually neurotoxic. And when you start consuming more and more of it, maybe if you have it one time, once a month, now and then, it's not going to do anything. But when now in the United States, 60 to 70% of calories consumed are now ultra processed. And a lot of these have now found their way into things like infant formula and all of that. So the toxin load right from infancy, or even sometimes in gestation, because it goes through the placenta, and in breast milk and so on, that it's has a whole range of effects on the nervous system, probably degrading, and its capacity for control and regulation. And what we're seeing really at the end of mind is that those who consume ultra processed food almost daily have real challenges with not just things like depression, but also controlling and regulating their emotions and their thoughts.
Something always comes up when you're running a private practice. Well, Gusto's payroll and HR services can make it a little easier. Gusto was designed for you, the small business owner. They take the pain out of running a business, automatically calculating paychecks, filing payroll taxes, setting up open enrollment. Gusto does it all. Want more? Time tracking, health insurance, 401k, onboarding, commuter benefits, offer letters, access to HR experts. You get the idea. With Gusto, you can focus on the joy of running your business. It's super easy to set up and get started. And if you're moving from another provider, Gusto can transfer all the data for you. It's no surprise 99% of businesses said the value they get for Gusto is worth the price. And here's the best part. Because you're a listener, you get 3 months totally free. All you have to do is go to gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. I'm telling you, you're going to love Gusto. Get started today. I'm wondering if there were, say, 3 things that therapists could really advocate for that, from the evidence you found in the Mental State of the World report, that would give us the biggest bang for our buck on a societal level. Like, we'll get to the private practice kind of individual in a minute, but what are the things that to you, man, if we just could get these 3 things right, it would really shift the mental state of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these are societal and structural in nature. But I think that those societal structural things can change when individuals are very much aware of how they're affecting them, right? Like, I think the knowledge that, you know, today, I think therapy and a lot of psychiatric, the approach to treatment and care has been very much on a symptomatic basis, where you kind of say, okay, something is wrong with you, and something about the way you are, and we're gonna, we can let's deal with those symptoms. But I think it's, if we can start giving people the understanding of these are some of the things that are driving that. Listen, you're eating all this stuff. Do you know that it has all these chemicals in them that are doing this to your brain? And it's the more you eat it, the more you're going to have these problems. So one of the things is, yes, let's work on the issues that have been created by that, but then let's also change that behavior so that it's not going to continue to have the problem. Because for example, if it's diminishing your emotional control, then you're probably going to you're going to have more conflict, more issues that you feel you need to discuss with and have therapy for. But if you can understand that some of it might be coming because I have these habits, or I'm eating this stuff, or that's degrading aspects of my brain, I better stop doing that, and then I'm going to feel better, and it will help resolve some of these problems. So I think really understanding, I would say just understanding the environmental and lifestyle factors that contribute to this, I think can be a big, result in a big shift for people.
Yeah. Are there a couple areas in your own personal life that you've shifted as a result of what you've learned from this report?
100%, 100%. I mean, I think that, for me, it's been really thinking more consciously and intentionally about how I spend time with my family, and how uh, what it means to really cultivate a close family, and be intentional about it, not just let things happen as they happen, but really have that as a serious goal, is that you want to keep that the family close together, and how do you do that, and what are the ways in which to do it. So I think that's been one thing that it's made me more intentional about that. um, I think a lot of, certainly my food. I've become a lot more conscious about what I eat, and um, also trying very much, like everyone, children or not. I mean, everybody struggles with like uh, internet addiction at some point or other, where you start scrolling shorts or something like this, and you're like, oh my God, I've got to stop doing that. This is not good for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are some. I think the other factor that I didn't mention, which really it features a little bit now in our work in the Global Mind Project, but we see, for instance, that if you're eating hot food out of plastic, it's causing a very like broad kind of diminish mental health. So that's very non-specific. It's like pretty much anything you're trying to do mentally seems to be a little bit diminished by exposure to having to microplastics. And so there's a lot of, other than microplastic, many other things that we've not directly studied yet, but certainly are in the literature, from pesticides to um, all of the endocrine disruptors, which are not which are very destructive to how the brain works as well. And so I've become a lot more conscious about, trying to reduce toxin exposure,
Mm-hmm.
just in my daily life.
Yeah. Well, let's talk private practice. So, I mean, I'm hearing that really kind of social connections, really being intentional around technology, and then intentional around the food, the ways we put it in our body, the types of foods, all of those sorts of things. A lot of it reminds me of kind of the blue zone diet, where
Hmm.
there's these blue zones that people typically live over 100, and yeah, they're eating kind of more close to the land. Like over spring break, my family, we went to Greece, and every town pretty much is serving what they can get locally. They're
Hmm.
not importing things. I mean, sure, they imported some, like wines from Italy or things like that, but for the most part, the food that was on the table was regional, and it's seasonal. And
Right.
so, looking at these kind of blue zones, when someone's sitting in a counseling session, maybe doing an intake. Let's start there. So they're assessing people. How can they take what you've learned from the Mental State of the World report and utilize that within an intake session as they're talking to people?
So we actually have a version of the assessment that is used for the the mental state of the world report and what we now call actually the Global Mind Project, that is available for practitioners, where you could actually use that to get a full 360 view of what their mental state looks like, their mental profile, their symptom profiles, but also what are all the risk factors in their life. What's to understand what their habits are around all of these different factors that we know drive different things. And so that will then give them the levers. It's like, here's where you are, and
Mm-hmm.
here's what in your life, some of the things that could be causing the problems that you're having. So that would give them then a way of a framework within which to craft their strategy for how to approach that
Mm.
patient.
And we'll have links to that as well at the end of the show. What are some domains or questions within that intake and that assessment that maybe people don't typically think to include in their intake questionnaire?
Well, I think a lot of you know, the most common that people, psychiatric questionnaires that people use are around depression and anxiety, right? So I imagine a lot of people use the PHQ-9 or use the GAD-7. And these, well, of course these are still issues. These assessments don't capture a lot of the types of symptoms that are rising, as I mentioned, things like detachment from reality and the hallucinations that are now rising. Like, you wouldn't think to ask about it unless you're like, oh, it might be schizophrenia or something. So this really provides a view across all of these different aspects that go well beyond depression and anxiety, so you can get a much better picture of the individual. And so it's a lot of those symptoms, but then it's also asking about these environmental factors, which typically people don't address, or not, typical intakes don't address. And so I think a lot of times people might ask about the end result of that. So, for example, if you might say, "Oh, I'm having these issues with my boss or my friend or a family member," but it's not coming back to what, your problems and how you're dealing with that, which is like, I'm having a problem with my emotional control. I just like fly off the handle when they say that, or those sorts of things. And then you could track that back to, okay, let's look at some of the things in your lifestyle. I mean, you really want to find more stability in how you deal with some of these situations, and what's going on in your life that could help that. Or what are things you can do that could help that? What are things you can change that can help that?
So good. The last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
That you know ultimately our mental outcomes, are the health of the mind is profoundly shaped by the environment, and I don't think you can underestimate how much all of the, not just the molecules that go into your body, but also uh, you know the uh, what I would call the stimulus environment, what you consume in terms of content, the interactions you have. It all makes a very, very big difference to how the mind and the brain is shaped, and the outcomes of mind. And so, focusing on the environment in which the individual um, is situated is extremely important.
Well, Dr. Tara Thiagarajan, thank you so much for being on the show. If people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, if they want to look at the report, where should we send them?
Well, you could go to sapienlabs.org, and to look at the, for information on the assessment for clinical practice, you can go to sapienlab.org/Joe, and we'll put some information up there.
Wonderful. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
I love looking at research and trends and all of that to inform both the left and right side of the brain. And, what Tara's doing with her organization is giving us more of that data. If you haven't checked out recently, we've had other people on here talking research. So episode 1392, we talked about treatment-resistant depression, looking at the research around that and using psilocybin. That was something that we talked to some researchers about. We also, back in, that would have been probably episode 1362, talking about the research behind AI replacing therapy and some of what we're seeing there. So all sorts of researchers that we have. If you've missed any of those episodes, go back and check those out as well. Also, we couldn't do this show without our sponsor. Today's episode was sponsored by Gusto. Gusto is who we use for our payroll solutions. I absolutely love it because it helps do all the taxes and file everything, and I don't have to worry about having a whole accounting team or bookkeeping team that's doing that payroll. So try gusto.com/Joe. You're going to get 3 months totally free. It's going to help you with your payroll and so many other things like doing open enrollment, filing payroll taxes, calculating paychecks, all that sort of stuff you can do with Gusto. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.